I hope I'm audible. Uh, yeah, am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Okay, so it's indeed a pleasure to introduce to you Anupama Raju, a poet and a friend whose work I have enjoyed following. Apart from being a poet, Anupama is also a communications professional, a literary journalist, and a translator. She's the author of Nine, an anthology of poetry, and has been featured in several poetry anthologies, very, very widely published. She's also translated Malayalam writer Paul Zacharia's stories into English. She collaborated some years ago with French photographer Pascal Bernard on two Indo-French poetry and photography projects, something I'm hoping she'll be able to talk about today. She's also held several prestigious writing residencies. I wonder, Anu, if you could begin by maybe reading to us a poem or two that work like autobiographies, a bio note sort of a poem, poems that help us see how you see yourself. I was actually thinking of your poems, I'm a Woman and I Write, and perhaps also your poem, Cleaning the House, but I leave the choice to you.
Sure. Thank you so much, Sri. And I'm just checking with everyone that I am audible. You can hear me, I hope.
Yes, I can.
Okay. Okay, great. So that's a great way to begin. But before that, let me wish you all a very, very happy new year. This is a wonderful way to start 2021. And thank you, Meera, Harish, Ranveer, everyone at the Prakriti Foundation. My association with Prakriti goes a long way back. So it is indeed a pleasure to be back and reading for you all. Thank you. And of course, particularly, I'm excited to be in contact with K.Srilata, a dear friend. We've been talking a lot this past year, so it's really a pleasure. And I think I will take your suggestion, Sri, and let me begin with this particular poem, which I wrote a few years ago. I am a woman, and I write. I am a woman, and I write. I am a woman, and I write. I write of longing, belonging, of my body, of everybody, of my home, my country, where I roam. I am a woman, and I write. My poetics are screwed up, my imagination dried up. I lack conviction, and I give up easily. I lack direction, and I give in easily. I seek a voice which will not be heard. I'm a woman, and I write. I make things up because they seem right. I'm everything I'm not. A devoted mother, a faithful wife. I lie exquisitely. I choose metaphors. I say grand things like, I'm a woman and I write. I declare, denounce, decry, and detest. I have a point, but don't care enough to make it. What can I say? I'm a woman and I write.
It was
So,
lovely. Thank you. One more poem, maybe.
sure. This is something that I wrote very recently. In fact, today being a Saturday, it's apt that I read it today. Cleaning the house. Saturdays are for cleaning and writing. And so I begin without map or warning, moving in circles, gathering dust and dirt. A week's cobweb gobbling more than spiders. Sometimes I return to the same spot, sweep under the dining table, pick up nothing. And so I spill some dust. Floors need footprints. Furniture needs proof of life. So I wipe them clean, except for the coffee mug stains. Spotless is boring, white, lifeless. I must write too, I say, as ideas settle on the corner coffee table. The broom, the dusting cloth, and mop fit beautifully in my hands. Their hold is real. Their hold is real. Much more than words don't reveal.
Thank you, Anu. Such a good poem for a Saturday, really. Yeah. Many of your poems I noticed are, sort of intertwined with the idea of place. Yeah, there are your, if I may call them Chennai poems, your poems about the Tarwad, Ambadi Tarwad, I think, right? So I particularly recall your House of Dreams, also the poem Mylapore, Chennai, and your poem Your Hands, which is actually, when I started to read it, it is, and it felt like a very moving picture of a mother-daughter relationship. But you've also sort of managed to sneak in the Chennai cityscape in parts, a cityscape that, as a Chennaiite myself, I was really able to identify with. So please tell us about these poems. Maybe read a few of them. Be good to listen to that.
Sure, would love to. You're absolutely right. I think place has always played a very important, I mean, not consciously, but somehow over the years it has, I noticed that more and more I seem to be returning to these places. Um, and especially over the last year, many of us haven't been able to go anywhere. And Chennai is my hometown, even though I don't live there. This is where I was, Chennai is where I was born. That's where I was raised. I went to school there. I went to college. I got my first job there. I met my husband there. I got married there. So practically, even though I've been living in Trivandrum for nearly, I think, 15 years now or more, I still consider Chennai my home. So I think what I'll do is I'll read a couple of the Chennai poems, and then I'll move into the Tarawad poem that you mentioned. Even though it is a place that I never visited, but it's somehow a constant presence in my mind. Okay, so this is, I would say it's a little, I know it's a little exaggerated and perhaps a little stereotypical, but I would like to call it a celebration of Mylapore, a locality I haven't been to in such a long time, but I would like to remember it this way. Mylapore, Chennai. Fresh vegetables and slush dot inviting streets. Fight with gods for space. Oiled plates, snakes charmed by tunes of wayside flutes and chattering bangles. Eager nostrils take Ade and Avial trails to Karpagam mess. Elegant silks dressed up tall glass windows. I saw my wedding sari. You know, there used to be a Radha Silk Emporium in Mylapore. I think it was called Rasi or something. And now I don't know. Is it okay? Haven't been there in a while, but at one time I used to really admire the silks that used to be displayed. Okay. Your hands. I wouldn't mind being a little girl again, holding your hands, visiting that store in T Nagar. Your hands knew everything back then. To wave reluctantly on my first day at school. Surprised I didn't weep seeing you leave. But I must have needed you. Because that night you took me to the store. My hands firmly in yours. I was happy in the knowledge of your hands. And when I suddenly couldn't find you, nothing was more terrifying than your lost hands. Your hands knew everything back then. To pack egg noodles and tomato rice for lunch, whip up brain omelets and scotch eggs, make prawns fry and feed us rice rolled in its spice. They made up for the moments you weren't there. You punished me every now and then, but I don't remember much of it. You were a devoted wife, much to my frustration, and seldom stood by me in my angst. But your hands knew everything back then, collected exquisite kanjivarams for my wedding, picked out my lingerie and my handkerchiefs. Your temper was famous and your moods unpredictable. You weren't a great role model if I wanted to be a mother. But your hands knew everything. We are both older now. You still roam the streets of T Nagar, waiting to choose things for me. Your hands seem to know less these days, but I love their smallness, their rounded ignorance. Someday, I will place my hands in yours again and will let go to see if I'm as frightened as back then.
Yeah, thank you. I love that poem. I love your hand so much. It does so many things. It's about place. It's about a relationship. You really pull it off. So thank you for that. And very very rich evocative poems of place. I mean your Mylapore poem, for instance. The Karpagambal mess and so on just comes alive for us as readers. So yeah, thank you for that, for reading them. Um, yeah. So also wondering, if I may ask you, what is it that brought you to poetry? What is it that keeps you there? You have, on the one hand, you have a day job as a communications professional, which to me, feels like another world altogether from poetry. I may be wrong, but so do you see these as maybe two separate lives? Are there ways in which they all come together? What holds your work, together, and what holds your life together, and what brought you here to poetry? That's what I want to know.
Thank you. That's a great question. And I sincerely don't know what brought me to poetry, but I think I started writing it, or rather, I started taking it seriously uh, when I met Dr. Ayyappa Panikar. And that was in Trivandrum. I used to write before that. I used to certainly participate in readings and things like that in Chennai. The British Council was famous for its sessions. I used to go and listen. And I used to participate in radio plays and so on and so forth. I mean, I used to enjoy all that. But I think it was Dr. Panikar who really kind of motivated me to take it seriously. And he used to have a monthly poetry group in Trivandrum where he lived. And he made me part of that group. And obviously that was it was a huge source of encouragement for someone starting out back then. I was still in my 20s. And he gave me some very good advice. First of it being, don't be in a hurry to publish. And he used to say, write as much as you can. Even if you write rubbish, it's okay, but keep writing. Um, so then that's how that continued. And then along the way, one does need a day job. So that's where my corporate life came in, and it came out pretty vibrantly. I'm thankful. So I have been working in communications for some years now, and my background in print media also helped. So you're right in the sense that the corporate life is so different from this creative so-called I wouldn't dare call it poetic life, but this other alternate life. But at times I also see them intersecting. I think creativity applies to both, because as a communications professional, I do have the freedom in my day job to bring in several elements of creativity. So I have to consistently look at new ways of communicating a message, of writing something. There are newsletters, there are videos, and so on and so forth, which we need to publish, which my department needs to bring out for the organization on a daily basis. So I think that is where I see these intersecting. There have been times when I have made poetry part of the corporate communications. There have been times when the employees in my organization have had to read poetry. But in the sense, I don't make it, I try to make it a little interesting for them, because, we have a daily newsletter. So it's practically like a newspaper. It goes out every day. So it has to be constantly new and consistently engaging. So that way, it is very interesting to see how these two, and that's what we all do, isn't it? When we write, we are constantly looking at new ways of writing and describing. So I guess that is where I see the intersection.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Yeah, you mentioned Ayyappa Panikar, and just a question from there. How important do you think is the role of a mentor for poets? Because it's my sense, I may be wrong, that we have a lot of people who are writing these days, a lot of really rich, interesting work coming out of poets, both poets writing in the vernaculars as well as poets writing in English in India. But I do still sometimes feel there is a paucity of mentors, a paucity of role models. And it's not as though anyone's deliberately not doing it, but I think we it's just not happening, right? So I was wondering if you could talk about that a little bit, and what kind of mentorship do you think would is really called for poets writing today?
Uh, yes, I think, I'm someone who benefited a great deal from a lot of role models and mentors. I was very fortunate that way, that many of these writers were accessible. Dr. Panikar, and Sachidanandan, Ranjit, Arundhati. They're all my, mentors, and everyone has been kind enough to offer. Even Karthika, I think Karthika is on this session, if I'm not mistaken. Friends who have offered, suggestions. Um, I think it's also up to the writer to be open to feedback. And it's never easy, is it? It's never easy to kind of to be told that, yes, that's great, but then maybe this one doesn't quite work. And that may be the word that you were really attached to. And then you just have to cut it off, and then you just have to kind of say goodbye to it. So I had to go through that cycle. And so, in that sense, yes, I think it's very important for any generation to have mentors, for writers, for the established writers to offer to be accessible to the younger or the upcoming. It has to be a two-way process. That chemistry does not always happen, but I think it depends on how open one is, and it depends on how accessible the mentor is. And then I guess it all clicks.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so I'd like to move on now to what I see as another thread in your work, which is really the subject of abuse, right? For instance, I think a poem you shared with me, Conditioner, makes a very unusual use of a daily object like a conditioner to write about abuse. Then I was also thinking of this piece you curated for Scroll, to which I contributed along with Karthika and Priya. And the theme was really body as metaphor of protest. And I remember your very moving poems in that for that piece as well. So tell me about that, and tell me about what really gets you, because abuse is a very it's a very hard thing to write about. It's a very hard thing to ideate, and I think it's even harder to do so via poetry in some ways, right? But I think it's also at the same time therefore extremely valuable, right? So can you say a little bit about that and maybe read a few poems on the subject that you've written?
Sure, sure. Yes, you're absolutely right. It's a very difficult subject to write about. What I try to do through my verse is to approach it with zero sentiment. I don't know if I succeed always, and thank you for your contributions to that particular section, because I feel abuse or the body as a metaphor, for instance, of that particular protest to abuse, I think is an important, it will always remain important. So that's what I have tried to do through the on that particular subject. So I'll just read without further ado. Conditioner. She should have used a conditioner, would have made it smoother when dragged by her hair. Any brand would have done, may have distracted her. Conditioners can condition hair, skin, legs, breasts, vagina, but mostly screams which don't leave a mouth held shut by a knife. If only she had used a conditioner, would have been a softer ride. When the cop listened with empathy, feeling her up. That night she used soap with glycerin and antiseptics, hoped it would clean her up. But nothing came close to a conditioner. Next time I will condition myself, she thought, as she brushed down her knotted hair. There's one more on that subject. What you don't know. You think you can stun me to sleep, shun my words, and hold me down. What you don't know is I'm an axe. I cut you down.
Thank you. Yeah. So the other poem that I think I particularly liked is your poem "When All Else Fails." I think it was also featured in the scroll, if I'm not mistaken. I simply loved the opening lines, and then you sort of take off and you do something quite amazing with the rest of the poem. Something that I didn't wasn't quite anticipating as a reader. So if you would read that for us, it would be lovely.
Sure. When all else fails, there's nothing left to talk about. Candles are all out. Rice has stopped growing. Rivers have stopped flowing. Nations are falling. The children are dying. No one left to follow. No one left to lead. There's no time for friends. Not enough hate to kill. Forget about passion. Faith is out of fashion. This is the right time. to go out and unite. This is the right time to go out and fight. When all else fails, declare a bloody war.
Yeah. Do you want to say a little bit about the poem?
I don't know if you insist. Well, I guess what I wanted to do through this was to kind of, the kind of solutions people resort to. And how does one respond to what is happening in the world these days, right? All I can do, all we can do is use words. But other than that, uh, when you declare a war, what kind of war does one declare, for instance? Can it be a war of words? Can it be a war of worlds? A war of ideals? And I guess I was trying to respond to what was happening, and all this has been happening for a long time. I don't know why I didn't write it sooner. So I guess I still feel that there is a lot more anger inside me, and I guess I will get it out. It will all come sometime. This was one such exploration of that anger, I suppose.
There's a spark, in the belly of that poem, just kind of bursts out. And as I said, I think not something I was expecting, and then suddenly it kind of explodes. And I particularly appreciate the way it moves in that sense. So yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, so let me move on to some of your other poems, which are really poems about relationships and intimacy. I was thinking, for instance, of your poems White Noise and Parasite. Could you read from those poems, and maybe also talk about it if you like?
Sure. So white noise, actually, it's there are two which explore the concept of white noise. So I'll read both. Both are short poems. White noise. What's the name of this night? Black, says the light. What does silence look like? Clean, says the night. Where do words come from? Nowhere, says silence. What's outside the window? You can't see it, says the world. Whose voice is that? You can't hear them, say your eyes. But what are they saying? Nothing, says somebody. And what are you listening to? White noise, says nobody. Our white noise. I wait for you a long time. At last, you call. You say nothing. You speak of no one. We hear each other breathe, heavy as nightfall. If no news is good news, if in silence we must love, I choose the bad over good. I choose not to love. Parasite. Sometimes I wonder what I see in you, why I hold on to you like an old habit. To what end this loyalty? Till when do I wait for you to admit that you too yearn for me? But when I remember how I feed off your smile, your skin, your silence, I wonder what you see in me.
Thank you, Anu. Yeah, so let's maybe move on to your collaboration that you did with French photographer Pascal Bernard. I think this was a poetry photography project, if I remember correctly. And I actually remember reading about this. Maybe it was in the Hindu, and being really intrigued by the work. So I was actually looking forward to a little chat about that today. And I think, perhaps Harish could share screen, maybe some of the poems from that project. And I would like you to tell us, after you maybe read from that work, also what the act of collaboration did for you as a poet. What did it bring to you? Especially collaborating with, cross genre collaboration in a sense, no? Is what it is. So I was curious to know what you,
Right.
you know, got from it and
Sure.
gained.
So what I'll do is I'll talk a bit about it, and then we could maybe I have three poems from the two projects that we did.
Okay.
So
Okay.
this was over 3 years. Pascal and I. It started with Pascal being in Pondicherry. He's from La Rochelle in France, and it was a project supported by a cultural institution based in La Rochelle, the city he's from, and the Alliance Française network in India, Pondicherry and Trivandrum. So he was in Pondicherry and he wanted to explore Pondicherry through photography. And I spent a few days in residency in Pondicherry with him. It was a wonderful experience. It was the first such experience for me. It was great to see him at work, how he saw Pondicherry, which is such a, for all Chennaites, all of you know already, and for those of you who are not from Chennai, I'm sure you still know that Pondicherry is this wonderful, mix of French, Tamil, and English influences. So it's a great place to be in. So there were his photographs, and I wrote short poems inspired by that photography. So that was the first leg. That was the first project, and it was called Une Ville, en Lieu, Une Personne, a city, a place, a person. And we had these triptych, uh, which were exhibited, and we had exhibitions running as part of the Alliance Française network in India and in France, in a couple of cities. And after that, we did the inverse, so to speak. I went to La Rochelle, and I was there for a period, and then I wrote poems, and then he took photographs based on the poems. But we both had a very clear understanding, and we had a wonderful experience in that there was a certain liberty, a certain freedom, a certain chemistry. We had very clearly agreed that the poems wouldn't run as captions to the photographs. The photographs wouldn't serve as descriptions of poems, but each would have a life of its own, so to speak. So yeah, that is, in a
Uh,
nutshell, that's what it was.
yeah, is Harish going to be sharing screen? I thought you had sent him some of the material earlier.
Yeah.
Yes, I have it. I can share if you tell me what poem you're going to read. I can share the thing according to that.
Okay. Actually, I have only three, Harish. So you could just start with anything, and then I will read the corresponding poem. I think that would be the best.
All
Start
right.
your.
All right. Yes.
Thank you. Okay. Okay. I hope all of you can see this.
Yeah, it's clear.
Okay. Okay. So this is from the second project, the one on La Rochelle, and this is something that Pascal responded to. The poem that I wrote was called The Last Supper. A couple sits at a bistro, their faces dark from coffee. With every sip, they draw blood. With every bite, they maul words. By the end of the meal, the sea would rise and they would drink each other dry. So if it's okay, we can move on to the next one. Right. This is from the first project from Pondicherry, and it's the lady you see in this is a dancer based in Pondicherry. So the whole idea is, it captures her, Anuradha. This is Anuradha. Anuradha's dancing on her terrace in her home in Pondicherry. So that is Une Ville, en Lieu, Une Personne. Pondicherry, the terrace, Une Personne, Anuradha. And the poem I wrote for this goes like this. The Wait. You said you would come to me. I danced on my terrace till the sun dipped, till autumn eyes turned to golden leaves and dripped. You lied. And we can now move on to the last one in the collaboration. So this is also from the Pondicherry project. What really struck me about this particular triptych was the whole play of light and, of course, the door. Nightless night. Last night had no eyes, no ears, no heart, no stomach, no skin, no bones, no dark, no light, no spirit, no silence. Last night had no warmth, no cold, no pain, no lust, no gain. But last night there was a dream, a denouement, a door. In the morning, you were outside. Thank you. All these poems and the corresponding images are there in my first book as well, that is 9. And so I just read from that. Thank you, Sri. And
thank you so much. It is a really interesting, I loved watching those images. And I remember some of it, coming across some of it in some of the articles that were written up, I think, following the project. Yeah, thank you for that. I was wondering if we could, now, if you would care to read us your bookshelf poem. In fact, it resonated, it had very interesting resonances with a bookshelf poem that I wrote myself very recently. So I was wondering if that is something you would like to share with us.
Sure, that would be nice. Thank you. And this is actually, in fact, right now I'm facing that bookshelf. So given that my day job is with a technology company, I've been working from home for almost a year now. So, which means this is my desk and this is my space. So I've been spending hours here, and quite often I get distracted when I should be. Sometimes I get distracted by the books and then I'm just staring at them. So I guess that's how I wrote this. bookshelf, Carlo and eyebrows, wilder than the light. Maya Angelou, let me take my time to rise. Plath, Das, stay bright, sting right. Tolstoy, Aristotle, Voltaire, teach me to think, not think. Basilissa the beautiful, pull out your doll for me. Italo Calvino, your mute cities where my feet don't bleed. James Bowen, your street cat fights. Suketu Mehta, I owe your maximum city. John Bignay, silence. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Anu. One last question, maybe before we wrap up and take on questions from the audience. You were also translating Zacharia, and I think one of your short stories, translations, has appeared in the out of print anthology. Could you talk about that a little, and how does your work as a translator, someone who's engaging with another language other than English, how has that impacted your practice as a poet?
So again, being in Trivandrum has given me access to Paul Zacharia's work, and he's become a good friend over the years. It's been wonderful translating his short fiction. For me, my work as a translator is still, I would consider myself a novice. I mean, in the sense, of course, I've been translating for a few years now, but I think that is my way of coming to terms with the language I speak, which is, I wouldn't know if I should call it my mother tongue, Malayalam. I did not study Malayalam. Growing up in Chennai, I studied Tamil. But I've always been interested in understanding the language and its roots and the heritage and the history. So that is how I approach translations. I guess I'm very careful as a translator, and I would, I guess that I'm not sure if it has ever influenced work as a poet, but while I discover the nuances of and to read between words, to read between layers, to understand what is not said, the silences, perhaps that is where poetry helps, because poetry is so much of that. I mean, you have to say so much by not saying. So maybe that is where they coincide. Yes, the one story which I had translated about now, I think about 7 years ago, called The Bar, had appeared in Out of Print, a wonderful online journal edited by Indra Chandrasekhar, and now they've just brought out this great book. So I'm happy that it finds a place there. I'm still kind of, the journey continues. So I'm looking forward to understanding Malayalam closely, because I don't write in Malayalam, I write in English. And maybe later on from Tamil, from French, who knows, because I love languages. So it's a love affair that continues.
Thank you so much, Anu. It's a real pleasure having this conversation with you. It's now over to our audience. So if there are any questions, please do raise them in the Q&A box. If you want Anu to answer anything, she's around.
And thank you, Srilata, for steering this conversation. It's such a delight to actually be in conversation and to respond. So thank you for your questions and your interest.
Thank you for your poetry. Yeah. Let's see if there are questions. If there's anything that you guys would like to ask. Audience, hello. Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, I think there is some.
No.
Yeah. So someone, Kartikas, I think, wants to
Yeah.
be possible to have a reading of a few of the uh, Navarasa poems, if there is time. Yeah.
Okay. Is there time?
Yeah, I think we have.
Yeah, you can do this one poem.
Yeah.
Anupama. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, okay. So we've lost Kartika's. Okay. So there are two questions that I see. Okay, Shri,
Yeah.
Able to see.
want to
Uh,
answer those
Are we not
questions?
visible? Are we both visible or not? I think
both
Kartika
are
said
visible for me, but Harish.
Yes, I can see the questions as well, and all of you are visible to me as well. It is going well, don't worry. Should I read out the questions, maybe?
Sure,
yeah,
please.
yeah.
Okay. Anju has asked, I like the restrained quality in your work. Does that come from a lot of editing?
Thanks, Anju, and thanks for joining. Nice question, by the way. Um, well, I've always believed in trying to trying to be as brief as possible. I find that very difficult actually, because when I speak, I tend to speak a lot. So when I write, I tend to do the inverse. So I think it's by choice. And yes, a lot of editing. It wasn't like that, but over the years it has, I have started to edit a lot more.
Next, Kashyana Singh has asked, hey, thank you both for your poetry. You mentioned writing on Saturdays. How do you sustain your writing practice?
Okay, good question. I don't know if I have I wish I had a routine. I always say that I write over the weekends, kind of thing. But it is true. I try to preserve the weekends for writing. But sometimes what happens is over the week, on a weekday, on a working day, sometimes these ideas and words come in. So then I immediately make a note of it on my phone, so that way my phone is, and I forget that I've made those notes. I try to return to that. So I guess that's how I ensure that the ideas don't leave me. I have such files in my computer as well.
An anonymous attendee has asked, do you find your day job and other writing you do influencing your poetry?
Hmm. Uh, the other writing that I do would basically be, the articles, the features, or the column that I write. But there, because it's essentially prose, I'm not sure if that influences my poetry. I think I'm a very different individual when I write poetry. But my day job, in the sense, uh, well, there was this one time when I wrote a poem about the place where the company I work, where I work for, where the company is headquartered. So in that sense, yes, I think again it's a question of place. And thanks to my job, I've had the opportunity to travel a bit. So in that sense, place has influenced. Yes, thank you.
Another anonymous attendee has asked, could you go into more detail on the role your Malayalam heritage plays in your poetry?
Well, there have been poems, uh, you know, I guess that influence is inevitable in any case. So any heritage for that matter. So because I grew up in Tamil Nadu, so naturally Chennai. There's a lot of Chennai. There's a lot of food. There's a lot of, as you heard, my school days. All that has come into it. But also my family, I guess in that sense, yes, it has influenced. The challenge remains: how does one do it in a way that is uh, that is innovative?
Kartika has asked, what do you take from the poetry into the prose?
Thanks, Karthi, and thank you for joining. Great question. Well, maybe the one element that I would like to believe that I take into prose from poetry is the ability to say a lot through less. Whether that whether I succeed, that's a different question. But I try to do that. Thanks.
That's all the questions there is.
Yeah, do you want to read the poems that Kartika had asked for? The Navarasa poems? Maybe just one poem, or I don't know. If we have do we have the time, Harish and Meera?
Hello.
I think we can do one poem.
One poem and close.
Yeah, okay. Great. As a conclusion, by way of conclusion.
Okay, so I'll read Shringaram, which is love, one of the rasas from the Navrasa series. Again, it appeared in the book 9. They scream, preach, scratch, score in a 10-year-old game played lame. Sonnets go sour, ballads great more. Scream, preach, scratch, soar. But when each day ends up as chore, or solace leaves suddenly as it came, he will dream, reach, search, soar for her in the 10-year-old game played tame. Thank you so much. Thank you, Sri, and thank you, Prakriti.
Thank you, Anu, and thank you all for joining us.
Thank you. Have a wonderful year and a great evening.
Yeah, here's to a good year. Starting with your poetry.
Thank you so much, Anupama ji and Srilata ji. Our next event is on 9th January, next Saturday evening, 7 p.m. Please check our social media for details. And thank you so much for attending. Thank you so much for reading out and sharing your poetry and moderating it. Have a very, very good evening.
Thank you so much. Thank you again.